Context of White Supremacy, Justice, and Gus T Renegade. It is a pleasure to do today's show. I'm a lifelong hip-hop fan, Public Enemy, probably one of my favorite groups of all time. I know definitely Fear of a Black Planet and It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, two of my favorite albums. I continue to listen to them. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. 20 years at this point, and I mean, incredible album. I was sharing the I was sharing the Night of the Living Bassheads video with someone, and I still think that's probably a legendary video. I have not seen anything to top it at this point. Dead Prayers is kind of close, but not quite in my view. Justice, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Right on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Outstanding. And our guest for this program, member of Public Enemy, incredibly well-informed black male. I've had the pleasure. I've been doing my research and watching some of his lectures, and real honor to be able to speak with him today. Professor Griff, are you there, sir?
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm well, sir. I am quite pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you. As I said, real fan. I'm not really on the groupie thing or what have you in terms of meeting artists, but it is a real honor to be able to speak with you today, sir.
Well, so we never really had fans. We call them fam. Everyone was our family, and we never bore them to the fan thing. Fan basically is a root word to fantastic or fantasy, and we never sold anyone a fantasy. Everything was real.
For sure. I want to get into the show so we can have as much constructive information, give you opportunity to share as much as possible with my listeners. C. Saye and Born Before Time in the chat room. Thank you all for supporting the C.O.W.S. Context of White Supremacy. This program is about sharing constructive information about the system of white supremacy. My definition for white supremacy and racism is a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to mistreating and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as non-white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that's an accurate definition for that system?
Yes, I truly believe that. I truly believe when that paradigm shifted during that particular time, I think our brilliant sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, in her book, The ISIS Papers, Keys to the Colors, I think when she gave that definition, she also said that it's a working, fundamental, basic definition of racism. And she even said that if anyone has a better definition, she would kind of adopt that and change it. But no one since then has stepped forward with a better definition. But her definition was based on her observation and her studies that she's done with Neely Fuller Jr., who wrote the United Independent Compensatory Code System and Concept. I believe he said it's a textbook and a workbook for thought, speech, and action for victims of racism, white supremacy. But when you think of Neely Fuller, the thing that stands out about Neely Fuller is the fact that he said if you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. And you can put that to the test. He gave us a list of show-offs based on racism, white supremacy, and I think it's one of those kind of situations where if you look at it and put it under the microscope, I think it works well, and it fits right into not only what happened yesterday with black people being colonized on the continent and put in the holds of ships and dragged to America and dehumanized and robbed of a name, language, culture, God, and religion, because those particular 9 areas of people activity that Neely Fuller laid out and Frances Cress Welsing mentioned in her book, The ISIS Papers, which are economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. He mentions a series of show-offs that we've adopted to impress white people that ultimately keep our people down. And she said that system of racism is actually a system, and it's not only local, but it's global. So for those of us that think that we're going to go to another continent or go to Africa or go to the Caribbean and you think you're going to escape it, I think not. It's a global system. Are you following me? So, we might as well unite and come to grips with the fact that racism, white supremacy is the thing, is the system that's running this world, and we need to come to grips with how it works and understand it in order to defend ourselves against it.
That is the entire purpose for this program. I want to make sure I remind our listeners, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing has been on this program. The program that she did with us is linked in the description for this show. Neely Fuller Jr. has also been here. He was on the program in May. Dr. Welsing was on the show in March. So we are continuing to build on their work. My co-host, non-white victim of white supremacy. She's 10 and she's here to learn about this system. I'm going to pitch to her. Justice, do you have some questions for Professor Griff?
Have you been across the world at all?
Oh, yes, I have. In some places. How was I treated? That's an interesting question. I was in Helsinki on my way to Russia, standing in line at customs, going to immigration rather, going through security checkpoints and that kind of thing. And ironically, I was chosen as one of the ones to get this super duper frisk and checked and that kind of thing. And make a long story short and a short story shorter, I was traveling with 12 other people. And guess who didn't make it to Russia that day?
Wow.
They lied and said I didn't have enough pages in my passport to support a visa. And if you know anything about traveling, you have to get the visa at least probably 2 weeks, 14 days before you even attempt to go to Russia. So that's the excuse that they used to detain me, take me into they got prisons under the airports. I'm not sure if you know that at 10 years old, but I've been to a couple of them. So yeah, I've been treated, rather harshly in certain places that I went. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that was just one experience out of the last 30 years that I've been traveling. And it's sad because racism, white supremacy doesn't only affect people in foreign countries that don't even speak English. Isn't that something to think about? That dealing with nonverbal communication and dealing with racism, it crosses the gender line, it crosses sex, it crosses religious lines, political lines. That if you have a high concentration of melanin, that you'll get treated a certain way. That's critical. Very critical. Not only by white people, but by black people. Because black women dare not speak to you while you're traveling. That's just something that black women don't do.
Wow. Justice, you have some more questions?
No, but I'll think of some more.
All right.
I will be right back because I want you to speak up a lot and ask Professor Griff anything that comes to mind. Professor Griff, I wanted you to, you already touched on, you are familiar, it seems very familiar, with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's work and Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Can you talk about...
Yes, I read both books twice.
That's what I thought. Can you share with our listeners how their work influenced what you produced with Public Enemy, particularly the Fear of a Black Planet album?
Well, when we started Fear of a Black Planet, we wanted to put subject matter on there that we knew that was not only controversial, but we knew that we had to put something out there that would penetrate the degree of ignorance in the black community. In studying Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's work, literally no one was able to touch this sister. I mean, I've seen the sister in debates, I've seen the sister lecture, I've sat at her feet, had the pleasure of of getting to know her, and she had a solid foundation, and you can't argue with it. You can't argue with it. So what better way to come back with our third album than to come back and deal with the subject that no one else on the planet wants to deal with, and that's racism, white supremacy. But I looked at it like, you know, if we don't do it, who will do it? Everybody's running the risk of losing their record contract or having the money dry up. Hell, we weren't supposed to be in the record industry, in the record game, in the recording industry that long anyway. So we said, what the hell we got to lose? You understand what I'm saying? So what we did was we took boxes and boxes and boxes of her paper that she wrote, The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation, and we gave it away free, almost 5,000.
Wow. Where were you giving this material out at?
Excuse me?
Where were you giving this material out at?
Everywhere we went. We don't care if it was the street, the project, the clubs we was performing at, the arenas we were performing at, regardless of where we were at. You were going to deal with this particular subject. This is why public enemy became so dangerous, because we spoke truth to power, and we stood on the shoulders of all those that already did the work. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing already did the work. Why should we reinvent the wheel? Nothing that I'm going to say to you in this interview tonight, you know, is any different than any other leader that has said this before. I'm probably putting it in a different kind of way, using a different frequency, but nonetheless, this is what it is.
Wow. I'm curious because you said that the group felt that you all had nothing to lose. You didn't expect to be allowed to make music, for a long period of time, to have a lengthy career like a white artist, or if you're a non-white artist and you're not dealing with racism, white supremacy. Were you prepared for the way suspected white supremacists in the music industry responded to you all's efforts with Fear of a Black Planet, and even, your other work, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, and everything else?
No. We said to ourselves, this program that we're putting together, i.e. Public Enemy, would only last 2 years.
Really?
It would only last 2 years. Right, exactly. This is what we said to ourselves, either because we were going to be dead or we were going to be in jail. Because some of the things that we had slated to say and do, you probably wouldn't want me to talk about on this interview. So yeah, we only slated it to last 2 years. That was it.
Wow.
So when we put out It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, that was our second album. That was the second year. It was supposed to be over then. So the intensity and the urgency that went into that album was supposed to be our last album. This is why white people deem that album to be the best rap album ever made.
Wow. Can you share with our listeners the way white people in the music industry, how they responded to your second and third albums in terms of mistreatment and efforts that they made to disrupt and mistreat you all?
Well, you have to understand that when you're talking about the genius of what Hank Shockley did, along with Keith Shockley, Eric Sadler, the Bomb Squad, right? There was a thing that back then there was no such thing as 4 and 5 producers working together as a production team. That was the first time that I've known that was done. That in and of itself was innovative. Not to mention that we had creative genius coming from Chuck D. Just coming up with concepts that was just kind of mind-boggling. I mean, who would ever think of Terminator X? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I had a title in a so-called rap group that you would only find in a black Afrocentric organization. I was the Minister of Information. You understand what I'm saying? I was the leader of the S1W, Security of the First World. No one was talking like that and had concepts like that in a rap group. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
So just coming out with an album called Fear of a Black Planet, what are these guys talking about? You mean to tell me you want to separate from America and have your own planet? Okay, we can see you having your own club or your own store. or even your own clothing line, your own video game, your own T-shirt, but your own planet, dude. And then to put out there that you're going to have it's a fear that you have, a deep-rooted, uncontrollable fear that if we have a black planet, that means that we're anti every other planet. Stop that. You know, we put fear in the hearts of the average person, including the average bougie, take it, you said, bootlicking Negro that seen Public Enemy coming and heard what we were talking about and knew that we would get up in your face with it. You understand what I'm saying? Be it on stage or in interviews or whatever. And they know we meant it because we were doing the work. When you didn't see us on stage or on the video or in concert, you seen us in the community doing the work. And a lot of the brothers and sisters that have consciousness today, especially in the Nation of Islam, they can point to Public Enemy and say, man, I heard y'all, man. It turned my life around. I heard y'all when I was in jail. I heard y'all when I was in prison. You know, I heard y'all when I was on drugs, man. It helped me change my life around. It must have been something in what we were doing, man, that had a messianic energy to it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Something that Reverend Bigfoot wasn't doing, and Pastor Fatback, something that they weren't doing. That they heard a song from Public Enemy and heard that we mixed Sly and the Family Stone with Gladys Knight, with Curtis Mayfield, with a James Brown beat, and some horns from Tower of Power. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
They was like, wow, okay. Then on top of that, we sampled Malcolm and Farrakhan over it. Then we came with some strong lyrics, some uncompromising lyrics. Oh, yeah, that was something to deal with, man, because first of all, you never heard of anybody doing that. And then to hear that these young brothers came out of the suburbs, Long Island, nah, we didn't have projects and that kind of thing like they do in the city. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Nah, we had manicured lawns, man, but that just goes to show you. It had anything to do with manicured lawns and trees growing and a park to go to. It was that racism, white supremacy, man.
Wow. I want to be clear for our listeners because I think this is very important. I'm just curious. I'm certain white people responded. White people, powerful white people who control the music industry. I am certain that they responded and emphatically to what you all were doing. Could you share some of the ways that white people mistreated Public Enemy, you yourself, and sought to disrupt what you all were doing?
Well, first of all, I do that after truly say and be very honest. The younger white people who were detached from this particular thing that we're talking about, racism, white supremacy, because it was on a subconscious level, because in the definition it says consciously or subconsciously determined. They didn't know anything about that. They thought it was radical, it was good music, it made them move, it gave them a voice. You know, they stood up with what they thought was right. You understand what I'm saying? So the young white person didn't have a clue. Now it became a problem with their parents and their parents' parents. Because now when you walk into little Susie or little Johnny's room, you know, and you got black people on the wall, now that posed a problem. You got Ice-T holding a gun and Ice Cube holding a gun and the Ghetto Boys putting up their middle finger and Luke holding his crotch, and then on the other wall you got Public Enemy. Oh yeah, white parents became concerned about that because that, you know, you're not supposed to be doing that. We got trust funds set up for you. We got Ivy League schools we're trying to get you in. You understand what I'm saying? You're supposed to be inheriting white supremacy to rule the world. So no, we can't have you listening to black radical groups like Public Enemy. I think Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, let me see if I can find it, the system of racism, white supremacy utilizes deceit, violence, inclusive of chemical warfare and biological warfare, and psychological warfare. So the whole sight game was being played. It was one of those situations like, yeah, you have the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, to express yourself. Because, by the way, we all believe in red blood. We're all red blood Americans, and we all have this particular freedom. But no, we didn't. No, we didn't. So they started sending out people to interview us, and the interviews got more and more critical. This is how come May of 1989, when I sat down with the brother, I was already 200-300 interviews deep.
Wow.
So when the brother sat down with the tape recorder rolling, and we had to stop the tape recorder every now and then because we were having a heated discussion just like this, and he asked me who controlled the music industry, and I laid out my perspective on who controlled the music industry via the book The Octopus, via the book National Jew, and a few other books that I had with me at the time. A book, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, written by the Historical Research Department of the Nation of Islam. After I finished laying that out for an hour, they wanted to tear my head off.
Wow.
And this is information that you can read right online. It's not something that Griff made up. It has nothing to do with my particular belief system. It's just information that's out there. I just put it together and was bold enough to tell it. That's all.
Wow. As I said, I've listened to some of your lectures, and John Potash, author of FBI's War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders, is going to be coming on the show September 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So be building on some of the information that you have shared. Justice, do you have some questions?
Yes, I do.
Go right ahead.
Have you ever been anywhere else in jail? Because if you did, why did they put you in jail?
Well, no, I used to work in prison. I used to work at Fort Leavenworth when I was in the military. After that, I came to Atlanta, Georgia, and I actually went to the police academy. I successfully made it through the what do they call it, the post-certification training that I made it through. But I failed the psychological evaluation, so I never got a chance to actually become a police officer. And little Justice, the reason why I wanted to become a police officer is I wanted to work in Child Protective Service. People that know me, that are close to me, have known this about me for a long time. If we don't educate the children and protect the children, what else do we have? And I thought that was the best way for me to serve black people, is to go into Child Protective Service. But, their domestic policies are like their foreign policies. They don't mean children any good. And you can get the best of us to go work in their system, and, we may help a little, but the overall goal of racism, white supremacy, is to survive genetically. And that fear is what drives these people to kill us and murder us and rape us, and destroy us and dehumanize us.
Okay. Gus?
Yes, we can hear you. Go, if you have other questions, go right ahead.
Okay. Gus, what FBI prison?
Wait, what?
What's FBI prison, like you said?
He said, what FBI? I can't understand the question.
Is it FBI pressure?
Prison.
Oh, FBI prison.
No, I worked in Fort Leavenworth prison in Kansas. Yeah, it was a maximum security prison. One of my main jobs in the prison was to escort some of the people that were in prison to court, to the hospital, to the doctor, to any work details outside of the prison. That was my main job.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have other questions, Justice?
No.
Okey-dokey. I'll check back in a minute or two. I know in doing my research, I heard you talk about how the non-white group known as NWA, how they were used to neutralize Public Enemy. Can you, break that down for our listeners, please?
Well, in my lecture, The Psychological Covert War on Hip-Hop, I talk about how we should at least put together a program so we could begin to destroy hip-hop's appetite for self-destruction. So as I approached a particular subject, I started studying not only John Patash's work, but the FBI War on Tupac and Black Leaders. I started studying COINTEL files online, some books that I managed to get a hold of, and I started looking into what Cynthia McKinney was talking about when she called me and said that young black hip-hop artists were being, there was surveillance being put on young black hip-hop and rap artists. So when I started studying, I started going back into when did this paradigm shift in hip-hop change? So I went back to probably, I'd say 90, 91, in around 91, when you start to see the rise of brothers and sisters on the West Coast, that frequency. And a lot of the people that came out of the West Coast took that very spiritual music called funk and put the kind of lyrics they put over it. And they set that music up, the powers that be set that kind of energy up to neutralize the consciousness that was going on in hip-hop. Mind you, keep in mind, everyone in hip-hop and all the groups that was coming up in hip-hop weren't necessarily conscious. We came up with Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, Houdini, EPMD, LL Cool J. So you had a variety. Are you following me? So we have to understand that particular dynamic. But in a book entitled The First Millennium Edition of The American Directory of Certified Uncle Toms, on page 236, it talks about how the FBI and the COINTELPRO took these Uncle Toms that were in the middle echelons of the music industry. Today we call them metrosexuals. We'll talk about that in a minute. They had the opportunity, these Uncle Toms had the opportunity to nurture and develop this original new sound that captivated young people. And they could have guided the evolution of rap as a positive force. They instead rejected the whole notion of the hip-hop movement and set up barriers against it via radio, magazines, and they tried to ignore it at one time. Do you remember the reports were coming out that hip-hop was a fad and it would only last for a minute?
Sure. Yes, sir.
When it passed that phase, these Uncle Toms sought to kind of neutralize Public Enemy at one point with the acculturation of cute little crossover groups. So when VH1 and MTV and these networks started up, you see a lot of Lionel Richie, a lot of Michael Jackson, a lot of these cute little crossover groups, some Madonna, some Culture Club, and some of these groups. So consequently, these white people, white businessmen, moved in because they adhered to their forebears. And they know from a long history of black music, if you want to make money, get you some black artists, rape and rob them for their money and their talent. And if you can't do that, set up white groups to do black music, and you'll benefit, as long as you don't pay the black artists. So this echelon of this middle echelon of whites came up, and you started seeing subsidiary companies, Jive Records and Zomba, and a lot of these other Def Jam, and a lot of these other subsidiaries. They got instant distribution because their uncles and their grandfathers and their parents had the major distribution. So they gave these subsidiaries to their children and their nephews and cousins. You understand what I'm saying? So they were the ones that knew hip-hop. They were the ones that came to the park and experienced 10 years of hip-hop before a lot of these companies came to birth. But a lot of these companies, when they first came to birth, they used to play this old milquetoast music, man. So they used Quincy Jones' Vibe magazine. And inside of the book, on page 236, the first millennium edition of the American Directory of Certified Uncle Toms, on page 236, it talks about how this group of white men began to promote the nefarious niggerization of rap music. And they used Quincy Jones's Vibe magazine to do it. So it became very popular to call yourself a nigger. And they made it a term that black people took, and we use it as a term of endearment. So when Public Enemy and KRS-One and other brothers struck back, then it got deeper, and deeper. It got to the point where it was one of those situations where we started putting out so much conscious music, and it started affecting so many people, and then they started stepping them up. They got to the point where they put out NWA, and everyone that came out with that kind of music was benefiting. Everyone, Ghetto Boys and everyone from NWA down, because NWA became the template. Now, I'm not saying that NWA was conscious of this. Don't get me wrong. They're victims of racism, white supremacy also. Mm-hmm. Are you following me? So we have to understand that particular dynamic. So, yeah, they were set up to neutralize Public Enemy. You know, the first couple of songs were fine, Express Yourself, F the Police, but shortly after that, they started disrespecting black women so hard it became ridiculous. That we was traveling with them, and we started having these kind of discussions like, okay.
Wow.
So it was critical. We even got critical on the road to the point where promoters wouldn't even book us to do shows together. So it's very few NWA Public Enemy shows. Are you following me?
I didn't. You said you all actually had discussions with NWA members.
Oh, yeah, we did.
With them. Wow. What can you share? Like, what were these discussions?
Yeah, how do you think Public Enemy did one of Ice Cube's albums? You know, Bomb Squad, we got together, right? So you have to understand something. They were aware of this. It's not anything that was a secret. Wow. Yeah, so we had these discussions. Myself, Ren, Dre, Ice Cube, we had these discussions, and it was one of those things where we talked about it. We talked about both of us, our groups being victims, and we wouldn't last long in this. So then their next strategy was to break the groups up, give this one a solo deal, you know. But, you know, the Jerry Hellers and Leo Cohens and these kind of people came in, sought to get rich off of black artists. You know, if you look at some of these artists today, they're still signing these 90, 100-page contracts that we had back in the damn 50s. You have to understand that particular dynamic, man. And these are some of the things that we discussed and brought out in the opening, was making artists aware. That's why that next wave of rap artists that came out, they started owning their own business. You understand what I'm saying? Putting out the records themselves, getting their own distribution. So we just didn't make records and do shows. We were educating people.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Context of White Supremacy with Professor Griff. I wanted to break down. You talked about the importance of names, and you were looking at a lot of the names that some of the non-white artists have. Pimp C, Bow Wow, 50 Cent, and just looking at these names and saying, this, I don't know if I would want to call myself this. This seems like you might have some confusion about racism, white supremacy, even Jay-Z's company being named after the Rockefellers, who have mistreated a lot of non-white people, and there's a lot of evidence to show that. Can you share with our listeners your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it talks about a name in the scripture where it talks about a good name is better than gold. I think Elijah Muhammad taught us, and we fought for a long time, man, to rid ourselves of the slave masters' children's names. It even talks about, in certain classical African civilization philosophy that we're taught by African-centered scholars, that we can't even enter into the hall of Ma'at, Ma'at being truth, balance, justice, and reciprocity. You can't even enter into the hall with someone else's name. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
So we have to understand something. So when you take on the logo, the name, the image, the low vibratory frequency of your open enemy, your slave master's children, oh, of course, man, you give energy to those demonic symbols. You give energy to that demonic name. You give energy when you borrow someone's name like Scarface. You know, when you borrow a name from a movie of a gangster, Scarface, or Benny Siegel, which was a Jewish gangster. So you end up with a Benny Siegel coming out of Rockefeller. You understand what I'm saying? And we don't even know who these people are. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So you have a name like, you know, Pimp C, or you have a name like C Murder, and ironically, he got charged for murder. That's that low vibratory frequency. That's that energy.
Again, Professor Griff, context of white supremacy. Justice, do you have some questions you would like to ask?
Yes, I would.
Go right ahead.
What songs would you recommend for 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds to understand about white supremacy?
Okay, can you ask that question one more time?
I said, what songs would you recommend for 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds to understand about white supremacy?
Okay, you have to clear that up. I can't hear her.
She said, what songs would you recommend for a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old so that they can understand white supremacy?
What songs would I recommend for 5 and 10-year-olds so they can understand racism and white supremacy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's a very interesting question because a lot of the songs that I know, a lot of the comrades that I know that make songs dealing with racism and white supremacy, they don't make them for 5 and 10-year-olds.
How about Stevie Wonder, about the red man, the yellow man, black man?
Oh, yeah, I'm here with my friend Tanny, who's in my band, the 7th Octave. She said Stevie Wonder has a song that talks about the red man, the white man, the yellow man. I don't really know the name of the song. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Songs in the Key of Life?
I think it is.
Songs in the Key of Life. Okay, we'll check that album.
Okay.
Do you have some more questions, Justice?
Yeah. Do
Go right ahead.
you
I'm
think
sorry.
any... Huh?
No, go on.
Do you think any...
I can't understand
Do you
her.
think there... Huh?
Oh, speak up, Justice, so you can hear you. Speak up nice and loud.
Do you think there is any other stronger belief besides racism and white supremacy?
Do I think there's any other what?
Stronger belief other than white supremacy.
Whoa, if we go over the definition of white supremacy, we're talking something a little bit deeper than a belief. Now, Justice, you have to understand something. You can have any kind of belief that you want to have. Whether or not that's actual fact is a different story. For example, we have people that call themselves Christians. They believe that you can just find a rat, a squirrel, a monk, a goose, a hen, turkey, whatever, pray over it and say Jesus' name over it and you're going to be healthy after you eat it. That, to me, is just not logical. Are you following me? They believe that you can just say Jesus' name, and as long as you believe and turn your life over to the Lord, you can walk out on the highway and walk in front of a Mack truck that's going 90 miles an hour, and because that's your belief system, you think you might survive. Actual fact says you probably would die if you got hit by a truck going 90 miles an hour. So you can believe whatever you want to believe. But whether or not it's actual fact, that is a different story. And of course, there is a stronger spiritual belief that's stronger than racism and white supremacy. Listen, no where you can find in the scripture, Bible, horn-drawn, pyramid text, any scripture you can find where the wicked prevailed over the righteous. You can't find it anywhere. So we know we're going to win this. We just have to be steadfast.
Do you have another or more questions, Justice?
No.
I wanted to touch on, you briefly mentioned or alluded to it earlier. Can you share with our listeners if you feel that suspected white supremacists are using hip-hop music to encourage or manipulate non-white people into being involved in homosexual behavior? I know you have mentioned that Pimp C, recently deceased non-white male victim of white supremacy, that he made some public comments about homosexual activity amongst non-white hip-hop artists, and he died shortly thereafter, reported drug overdose. Can you share with our listeners if you have any thoughts on how suspected white supremacists are manipulating non-white people to be involved in so-called homosexual activity through hip-hop music?
Well, if we understand that particular behavior, that behavior is not African-centered. So that behavior had to be introduced to us as a people. Someone had to bring that frequency in. Someone had to bring that vibe, that vibration in. Are you following me? So
yes, sir.
We have to understand it. So when you see black African people participating in this learned behavior, they were taught and trained to tell us that they were born this way, but we can't find it nowhere unless you have these modified genes that they're doing these kind of experiments and going into the DNA and changing your genetic code, and they're putting the gay gene in. Are you following me? So yes, we have racism, white supremacy, and how we interact and relate to one another, and how we understand racism, white supremacy. That is, a lot of us feel that this is what we have to do in order to, quote unquote, make it. Now, when racism, white supremacy turns up the thermostat and it gets real uncomfortable and real hot, a lot of people are going to do a lot of crazy things, i.e. homosexuality, bisexuality. Are you following me? But when I mentioned this several years ago, when I started calling out names like Puffy and other people, and Russell Simmons and Quincy Jones, and these sex rings that they know of, and in some cases participate in, everyone turned a deaf ear because they thought I was coming down on homosexuals. That's not the case. I was just stating facts and putting it out there that these sex rings do exist. Someone had mentioned earlier about, Barry Obama. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to understand this, that this stuff does go on among black people, introduced to us by racism, white supremacy. And we have to understand that. The whole idea of this criminal element, the whole idea of pornography, marrying itself on to hip-hop. This stuff is very, 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 very real. And this is learned behavior. And if it's learned behavior, when we defeat racism, white supremacy, we're going to have to go through a process of really unlearned behavior.
I wanted to be clear because I thought that you had said that Pimp C, before he passed away, that he also talked about this publicly. And I don't know, maybe that there was some relationship between what he said and him passing away, reported drug overdose. Is that true? Did he make some public comments about this?
Oh, wow, he was on the air, man. He was blasting people, and he was calling names. He was making it very, 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 very uncomfortable for a lot of people. Very uncomfortable. He started calling out people's names, prominent people, names that are here in Atlanta and in L.A. and in New York. Shortly after that, they found him dead in a hotel somewhere.
Wow. I wanted to touch on also, because I know Dead Prez, I think they're another group non-white males who make an effort to address racism, white supremacy in their work. They talked about how suspected white supremacists strategically marketed their music to white people so that they would end up going to do shows and performances, and it would just be a whole crowd of white people. Have you experienced this both with Public Enemy, and have you seen this with Dead Prez, where music that is supposed to be informing non-white people about racism, white supremacy, ends up being steered so that white people end up being the predominant ones that listen to it?
Well, I don't know if that's true, to be honest with you. I really can't say that. When the Public Enemy first came out, we had all white audiences. I think it had something to do with the economics. I think it had something to do with them just not really looking at, the black dollar in certain particular areas. They just said, okay, after a while, I don't think this consciousness stuff will sell to black people. And they stopped promoting it to black people. I know with the Public Enemy shows that we do, it's all white people. You might find some black people in the audience, but no. The early days of Public Enemy was all white. And even now when we do shows, especially with what Flavor Flav is doing, this ungodly madness that Flavor is doing on TV with this Flavor of Love madness, hell, the first 10 rows are none but little white girls.
Wow.
Now a lot of times when we come to the city, we're like, where is the hood? When we go ask people from the hood, they say, wow, we didn't even know y'all was here. Because the magazines that they use to promote, the radio stations that they use to promote y'all coming, black people don't listen to that stuff.
Have you
so they strategically do this.
Wow. I'm just curious, have you had discussions? You said you all had dialogue with NWA. Have you had discussions with Flavor Flav about his conduct and,
Yeah, but, you don't want to hear it. To him, it's better than selling drugs. To him, it's better than, being poor. It's not like he got a master's degree.
And he is a victim of white supremacy, not passing judgment. I was just curious if you all have talked about that.
But that still doesn't let him off the hook.
I understand.
Like Mama said, if you knew better, you would do better. You could be a victim all you want to, but how long are you going to claim that you're a victim before you realize, okay, you need to do something? There's certain things that you can do. Instead of wallowing your victim status, hell.
I understand completely, sir. Justice, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Justice, are you with us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you have any?
I don't have any questions right now.
Oh, okay. I wanted to, I guess, for anyone that's listening, if they're not familiar, just the radical change that's taken place in hip-hop music from when you all first came out, and Africa Bambaataa, Zulu Nation, Native Tongue Family, just a lot more diversity, I'll say. It was probably the first time I've used that term on this show. A lot more diversity in terms of the hip-hop artists that you would see. I don't see that so much now. Can you break down for our listeners just in terms of how the system of white supremacy is really, it seems to me, in full force using hip-hop as a weapon to degrade and confuse non-white people?
Well, I think with the advent of the talk show, the advent of, the talk show on AM radio, now FM radio, I think with the invention of the Jerry Springers and Maury Povich and this kind of madness, with the sitcom, with the magazines and the commercials and this kind of thing, I truly believe that, on every facet of our existence, that we get a double dose of racism, white supremacy, and they fed it to an unsuspecting young white public as though, we're the enemy. We're the enemy. And at the same time, they made it appear to the young whites that in our defense of ourselves, this is an aggressive act and it should be dealt with. You understand what I'm saying? So it's truly ugly. But I want to close out by saying this. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, racism and white supremacy. The system of racism and white supremacy utilizes deceit, violence, inclusive of chemical warfare, biological warfare, and psychological warfare, which I mentioned earlier. Indeed, any means necessary to achieve its ultimate goal, objective of white genetic survival, and to prevent white genetic annihilation on the planet. She says, in the existing system of racism and white supremacy, when the term is undefined and poorly understood, there is a general confusion and the chaos on the part of victims of that system, local, national, and global. The question remains, can young whites that are unsuspecting and unconscious of these things be a victim? And I believe that's what you're asking. Yes, because when you go to the parties now, to the club, when you throw it, I went to see De La Soul. Mm-hmm. I swear, the first 30 people in line was all white people. You see a black couple, then you see another 10 white people. You see a group of black people, then you see another 8 white people. And we're made to think that hip-hop is nothing but just rap music. And then the DJ, don't dare play those radical, conscious songs. You don't hear those during the intermission or before the group comes on. You don't hear that stuff. See, and then it becomes impossible for the victims of racism and white supremacy to effectively counter the global system of racism and white supremacy. The African enslavement, imperialism, colonialism, neocolonialism, fascism, which I believe Barack Obama is the face of fascism now, a black reality, a black face over a white reality. Study the document AFRICOM and why they're going back to recolonize Africa using a black president. And it says all of these things are dimensions and aspects of racism, white supremacy, all of the isms that I just mentioned. This is real, brother. This is real. White people are victims to the point where they have to be now taught by us. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
And they learn by the rap songs. They learn by secretly listening to Minister Farrakhan and tapping into some of these black websites. They know. They're not foolish. They'll tell you. They know aspects of our history better than we do. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Bradley's written books.
He's been on this show.
And other people have written books. Right. So they know. But I'm sorry I have to wrap this up. I'd love to do a part 2. I want to dive into the symbols of racism and white supremacy.
For sure. I would love to have you back. I actually would love to talk to you once later after the show to see if we can also have Chuck D on the show at some point. I don't know if you can facilitate.
Okay, just give me a call, and what I'll do, I will see Chuck Sunday. I'll definitely ask him, and I'll get a word to you.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you a ton for doing the program. Professor Griff.
Oh, give thanks.
Thank you, sir.
All right, until little just as I said, peace, all right?
Will do, sir.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care. All right, peace.
Context of White Supremacy with Public Enemies, Professor Griff. Definitely looking forward to getting him back to do another program. Hopefully we could do it next month. We could get him sometime around when John Patosh comes on. And I'm real excited about that program. John Patosh, his book, The FBI's War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. This is a white person wrote this book. He'll be on the show September 27th. At 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. That's a ways off, but already down. He's sending me a book for free. I'm excited. I'm thankful. And anybody not informed about COINTELPRO, go back, check the archives. April 13th, Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly was on the program. He talked extensively about suspected white supremacists in the FBI and their actions in COINTELPRO. His book, Racial Matters, the FBI's Secret File on Black America. He was on the cows. Check that program out. Very informed white man. He actually said he would be willing to come back on the show, so I might even have him to come back and share more information. But please check that show out. You can learn a lot about things that enforcement agencies in the system of white supremacy do to maintain this system. Justice, did you have anything you wanted to share with our listeners?
Yes, I do.
Go right ahead.
I had a question for Professor Gift, but he left, so I'll say it. What hip-hop music supports justice?
What hip-hop music supports justice? My thought, and I could be incorrect, as long as we're in a system of white supremacy, all of the music that non-white people produce, put on CDs, or that people are listening to, is supporting the system of white supremacy. Maybe if we get Professor Griff back on the show, you can start the show. That could be your first question, because I would love to hear his response. But my view, long as the system of white supremacy exists, doesn't matter if it's Mos Def, doesn't matter if it's Talib Kweli, Dead Prez, all these people are signed to record deals that I suspect white supremacists ultimately control. So if you're making music and you're making CDs, people are buying your music, you are directly and or indirectly supporting the system of white supremacy. That would be that's my view. I could be incorrect. I will make sure we have this recorded now, so we'll make sure we remember. We can get Professor Griff back on the program. We can ask him, and hopefully, if he can get Chuck D. Chuck D is also a black male. He's in the same group with Professor Griff. If we can get Chuck D on the program, you can ask him. So you can ask two non-white artists and hear their view, see what they think. Maybe they have a different answer than what I just said.
Okay. And what does justice mean to you?
Justice to me means no one being mistreated for any reason, and the people who need the most help get that help without fail every time. That's what justice means to me. And unfortunately, we do not have a system of justice now. Unfortunately, we are in a system of injustice, otherwise known as the system of white supremacy.
Okay. And justice means to me is justice means no confusion, and whoever needs help gets the most help.
I dig that. No confusion is not good. How do you feel about that? Confusion is not good at all.
I feel that confusion is very, very bad and has hurted a lot of non-white people.
Have you been confused?
And then, is there a show? Yes, I have been confused.
Did it feel good when you were confused?
No, it didn't.
Me too. I do not like being confused. As a black person, I am frequently confused, and I do not like it at all. It makes my head hurt. In fact, I spoke with Cynthia McKinney. See? You too. See? It makes our heads hurt. I spoke with Cynthia McKinney, and there was confusion that disrupted the broadcast yesterday. Someone contacted her before the show and caused confusion about when she was supposed to be doing our program. She apologized. We're looking at doing a makeup program, so hopefully that will be soon so we can get Cynthia McKinney on the cows so she can share her experiences as a non-white person, I suspect a victim of white supremacy. Hopefully we can get that done soon. At any rate, next week, Friday, Justice and I will be back. We will have a show next Friday morning at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Dr. Peggy McIntosh. She will be here. She is author of White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. Very interested to speak with her. She is a very informed white woman. She's sending me her work. Get to read it. White people are actually sending me material to read for the show now. I don't know what that means, but that's a new thing for me to experience, to have white people send me their material so that I can check it out and prepare for the show. That's Friday. Professor Ian Lopez, he will be here next Saturday. We will be talking about his book, White by Law. Very interesting read. He is talking all about how being white changes and who gets to make those decisions with regards to who is white, who is not white. And next Sunday, that would be August 30th, Professor Vernelia R. Randall will be here. She will be talking about her book, Dying While Black. Back of the bus, put this book in my hands today. Incredible. Just all about how the system of white supremacy is designed to make non-white people unhealthy and sick. She will be here Sunday, August 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and for Saye, that would be 10 p.m. in Austria. Justice, do you have any comments before we check out for today's program?
No, I don't have any questions or comments. Oh, wait, I do have a comment. That was a great show. That was one of my favorite shows that I've ever had. It was great.
Wow. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, too. I'm a big Professor Griff fan. I'm a big Public Enemy fan. That's one of my favorite groups. And, yeah, that was a real treat to be able to speak with him. Hopefully we can get him back again. And I'm definitely going to make that call, see if we can get Chuck D on the cows. I would dig that. Maybe we can get everybody. Maybe they can get Flavor Flav as well. I would enjoy speaking with him on the cows, too. We can get the whole group. Justice and Gus T Renegade, wrapping up what she said, was a great show. I'm not checking the switchboard today because I'm tired. I'm a victim of white supremacy, and I am black. I don't feel like checking the switchboard today. So if you called in, thank you for supporting the cows. I'm a victim. I'm a victim. It's better than me dating a white person or, doing something else, selling crack, just not answering the switchboard today. So thank you for supporting. I'll make sure I get the switchboard next time so you can ask questions, because we'll have a white person on the next show. Definitely, we'll take it to switchboard so we can get calls. Thank you for supporting the cows. Context of white supremacy. We will be back. Please support Cree 7, counter-racist evolving engineer. Please support her efforts. She's here at Blog Talk Radio. Going to play Mr. Edward Williams' commercial for Counter-Racism Radio. And, yeah, I think this was a good program, too. Hopefully you all found it constructive. We will be back next show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity. Using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.